if you are struggling to find a job after a coding bootcamp, this video is for you. I promise you, you are not the only one. And we're going to go over some tips that I think will be very helpful. So first of all, if you've been at it for a little while and you aren't getting companies responding to you, you're not even getting an interview, reach back out to the coding bootcamp. Ask for advice, see if you can talk to staff. Very often those programs have career services, and you would be surprised at how many students don't take advantage of that help. Reach back out to your program, your coding bootcamp, and ask for help. Even if it's just like a 30-minute Zoom session, so you can talk about how the job search has been going and what they suggest moving forward. Most programs want to help you, even if they're not strong programs. A lot of the staff brought into these programs do care about the outcomes of the students. So reach back out to the program, ask for help. But also, a lot of this job process is on you. And so a lot of people drop the momentum. When they graduate, they just went through an entire rigorous curriculum, especially if it was full-time and immersive, and they want to take a break. Don't stop that momentum. It's one thing for you to take a little bit of a break over the weekend, but you want to keep that momentum going. You want to continue coding. You want to continue working on projects. You want to continue applying for positions. So what I recommend is everyone has a certain amount of available time throughout the week after they graduate. Some people will go to part-time jobs, but either way, I try to give it in percentages. So what I recommend, and people are surprised at this, but you should only be spending about 10% of your time with data structures and algorithms, especially if you aren't focused on backend, if you aren't focused on a big tech position. So you still should be focused on it. But I see a lot of people that will spend, 80% of their time just trying to really get those data structures and algorithms down because I feel like that's where they're lacking. But when you graduate a coding bootcamp, you are still all that knowledge of applying, or all of that knowledge to building something practical, like an actual project, most likely what you're going to be working on when you become a professional software engineer. Those, that knowledge, those skills are so, they're not really solidified. Your goal after you graduate a coding bootcamp is to reinforce what you had just learned, and you do that through project work. You might be tested through data structures and algorithms, but ultimately you are going to grow through, or as a software engineer, through project work. You need to build those projects. You need to start building up your portfolio. So I would say put 60% of your time, your available time, into those projects. And then I would say about 20% of your time should be focused on applying for positions. 10% of time networking. That includes, maybe finding a meetup that allows you to meet other people in the industry. You can network through hackathons, developer communities. You can even reach out to LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, reach out to software engineers. I've talked about this in my previous videos, but you can just, if you have someone as a connection that maybe is a software engineer, professional software engineer, and they write blog posts, read one of their blog posts, and maybe even to bring up a couple of points with their blog posts that you really enjoyed, that you really agree with or disagree with. But ultimately, like content creators or anyone producing content, they want people to engage with that content. So you can bring up those points, and when you're providing that value, it also opens them up a little bit more to wanting to return that value. So, that's a really good starter conversation to even saying, hey, can I, please just grab 10 minutes of your time, hop on Zoom, maybe during lunch or whenever you have free. I'm really struggling. And I think a lot of software engineers really can empathize, because we've all been here. We've all struggled. And so I think a lot of software engineers empathize when someone is really struggling as a junior developer, just trying to get their foot in the door. And when you limit it to just a 10-minute window, that's a pretty reasonable time that doesn't take up, a big block in someone's schedule. So, reach out to LinkedIn, but ultimately kind of just reach out and try to meet other software engineers. But I think like the big point I want to really drive home is, well, actually, before I do, I'm going to say 10% networking, and then let's solidify with this 5% of just learning something new. Another big mistake people make when they graduate is they feel like they don't know enough. They feel like they need to continue learning. And ultimately, what you need to be doing is reinforcing what you just learned. You have so much information in your head right now. You've learned so much. You need to reinforce that, especially the fundamentals. That's so crucial. That's so incredibly important. If you are learning new libraries and, that's very common. A lot of software engineers can get fascinated with new libraries and new technologies, but you need to really make sure you understand the fundamentals well, because that's most likely what you're going to be tested on. So reinforce what you had just learned, and then it's okay to pick up an article. At the end of the day, maybe, or figure out like what part of the day you feel like you retain something new that you had just learned. But, watch a YouTube video, pick up an article, learn something new, that's fine. But it really needs to be like 5% or less. I would be very careful, because you're going to get a lot of software engineers, even a lot of content creators saying, oh, you should learn this, to make you so, much more marketable and competitive. If you're not learning this, like, what are you doing? You're getting behind. And most of that is BS, honestly. Really focus on the fundamentals. Really focus on reinforcing what you just learned. That is going to go a long way to making you much more competitive with other entry-level applicants. So I'm going to hammer this home. Prioritize your projects. Put time into building out your portfolio projects. It's going to, just building out portfolio projects is going to help reinforce what you would just learn. Even if you can't just like read a book or watch YouTube videos, or even go back to your old curriculum videos and just watch and read and try to reinforce the knowledge. That way you have to apply it. You have to apply it and think about it in a more complex manner. Even something better than just like reading or listening is like just trying to teach an imaginary person next to you, or family member, whoever has the patience to listen to something that they don't understand, or even just another software engineer. If you, maybe you have other people that you graduated with in your cohort, practice teaching each other the concepts that you just learned, but you need to start applying this material that you just learned in a more complex manner. It's going to reinforce it. You're going to remember it. You are going to understand it. And more importantly, when you apply it to projects, you are going to really reinforce why what you just learned is necessary. So, project work. I can't emphasize that enough. And a lot of people, I've heard people saying, well, cover letters are a waste of time, and you'll hear stories like, well, I got a job without a cover letter. Sure, some people do. Most companies will more seriously consider you when they can see that you've appreciated, like you kind of understand what the company's about, and you understand how your skills can translate into providing value for that company. And you can do that in a cover letter. Include a cover letter with every application. It's going to be much stronger than just applying to a bunch of companies with this static one template resume. If you want to go the extra mile, when you're applying to front-end positions, full stack or back-end, your resume is probably going to look a little bit different depending on the position. You could even go as far as making it different for the actual company and tailor it to the company. In my opinion, that's going too far. You can have a few different versions of the resume based on like whether it's front-end focused or back-end focused. That could be helpful. But ultimately, that uniqueness is going to come out in your cover letter. Include cover letters. So your resume, I've seen another big mistake a lot of people are making. Remember, oftentimes your resume is that first piece of contact you have with the employer. A lot of people's resumes will focus on their education. They'll focus on even their old industry. Like half of the resume is about like how they were a manager at a fast food restaurant, and leadership experience is pretty good, but ultimately, like nothing about it speaks tech. Nothing about it speaks you being a software engineer and you being able to code. I think it's healthy to show a work history. I think it's healthy to, you could probably sum it up in a single bullet point. If you have leadership experience, how that's going to apply to any developer position. But ultimately, your resume should speak to you being a software engineer, not you being a manager at a fast food company, right? That's incredibly important. A lot of people make that mistake. So half of the resume is about all of their old experience. I think you should show the history, that you have a work history and you have a steady work history, especially if you do, but ultimately you're just showing the work history. What should be emphasized on your resume are your projects, experience as a software engineer, and your projects are experience as a software engineer. And that's, really the experience that you're going to highlight. Now, maybe we could dive into, okay, so what kind of projects are going to be, they might not be professional experience, but it's still experience. But we could talk about like what kind of personal projects are going to be more valuable to employers, and what are going to be less valuable. If you want to see that, let me know in the comments. I can create a video on that. But ultimately, like, what are you building? What have you learned? Focus on you as a software engineer. Focus on you as a coder. It's okay to put your education, but I've even seen like 3-4 lines about, the coding bootcamp. All that's doing is taking up space. What should be taking up space on your portfolio, especially if you don't have any professional experience as a software engineer, you're talking about projects. List your top 3 projects and really focus on that. Highlight the skills, highlight even a couple of the challenges that you face with that project, what you would have learned, what libraries or tech stacks. If it's a group project, if it's a more complex project, maybe it was like a final capstone project for your coding bootcamp, you can include that and include your role. What did you actually build? What features, what component of that larger complex application did you build out to make that whole piece of the project? So ultimately, talk about you being a software engineer. Your resume should speak to you being a software engineer, and that's what should take up majority of your resume. I'm really emphasizing this and I'm repeating a few things, but it's so incredibly important. I see so many aspiring software engineers screwing this up, and that is the first piece of information an employer really has about you when you apply. That resume, a lot of people screw up, and that's why they don't get that call back. So what else? Hackathons. Especially as hackathons are starting, I can see hackathons and just meetups in general starting to be shared more. A lot of meetups are kind of opening up and scheduling events more, which is really cool. You need to kind of, I would get out there a little bit. You can include this in like 10% of networking, but like if you can participate in a hackathon, that is huge. A hackathon is a very condensed version of working on a team and stepping on each other's toes and trying not to step on each other's toes, but working really fast to learn something, to build something as fast as you can that you hope is valuable. A lot of hackathons will have themes still. Some hackathons will be focused on social issues. Some hackathons will be focused on just different industry issues, solving different industry problems. And in that condensed time, there's so much growth that happens, but ultimately you have a project. I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of projects where they never got finished and I would spend over a month on them and I would still ditch them. A hackathon forces you to build an MVP as quickly as possible, and that's it. Then you finally get a project out there, it's finished. Because you also have pressure of the team. Everyone's trying to come together to finally build this product. So there's less of motivation to basically ditch the product. You're on a team, you want to finish this product together. And also with hackathons, very often companies will bring in recruiters, or the host will bring in recruiters, different companies to take a look at these projects. When you have hiring managers' eyes, when you have recruiters' eyes on the actual work that you can do, that's what you want, right? That's ultimately what you want. So hackathons are really powerful in getting your name out there, your skills out there as a software engineer, and just getting yourself out there, getting exposure to people that might potentially hire you. So there are meetups, like I said. I would focus on networking-focused meetups where you are meeting other software engineers. You don't necessarily have to meet with recruiters or hiring managers. Remember, the software engineers that you meet, they can, they might get hired before you, and they might put in a good word. Very often, software engineers, especially at slightly larger companies, will hire kind of just like bulk amount of software engineers. They'll hire several, not just one. And so a question I've often been asked is, after I'm hired, like, who else would I recommend? It's like, I didn't know you even cared about my opinion, but I guess we're desperate for software engineers. And so I would make those recommendations, and often those people would get interviews. So just put yourself out there, whether it's meetups, whether it's hackathons, developer communities, put yourself out there. I know a lot of people are shy. I know it's difficult. It's a skill you need to build up. But yeah, that's also another option. Also, reach out to third-party recruiters. I personally think I think third-party recruiters are a huge advantage for entry-level markets. And I do feel like a lot of people might struggle to get a recruiter's attention. You can do that through creating content. You can share your project on LinkedIn. When you create content on a platform that is, has a lot of exposure and discoverability, LinkedIn is a good platform for that. And a lot of recruiters, a lot of hiring managers are looking out for posts. So even if you just talk about a project you just built, what you had to learn to build it, that's huge. If you're answering questions on other people's posts to help them, a lot of aspiring developers will ask questions. What should I do? What technology should I learn? Blah, blah, blah. If you feel like you have a legitimate answer to that, share that. Your post is usually highlighted in the feed of everyone connected to you. I don't know if LinkedIn has a specific algorithm that prioritizes that. They probably do. But still, like, the more you put yourself out there, the more you help people, the more you help people in a public way, the more chances you're going to have of being discovered by someone that is a hiring manager, that is a recruiter, that is looking out for that. So I can tell you for sure, me helping other people and putting myself out there is what got me my first position. That was it. I've talked about it in previous videos, but that 100% was it. So, a lot of people shy away from content creation. That's why I just encourage you to make a LinkedIn post, talk about your project, but more importantly, if you like creating videos, if you just like talking to people, have you ever considered live streaming, live coding, creating YouTube videos, tutorials, or even just giving tips for, maybe you just graduated the coding bootcamp. One of the first videos I created was, here's my experience at Full Stack Academy. And it got a lot of hits. It helped a lot of people. And ultimately, that kind of content that I created and made public got noticed. Eventually, I really think my live streams and helping people out with my live streams is what got me that first position. So, it's hard to pinpoint the exact thing that's going to get you that position because it's very different. And a lot of it's just, I don't like to use the word random or chance, but sometimes it is. And sometimes the algorithm is in your favor. Sometimes it isn't. I think a lot of people don't really understand how algorithms work, including me, specifically. So we're kind of just experimenting, pushing content out and seeing, who bites, and who actually looks at that content. So the message really is, even if you don't like content creation, just little stuff like getting yourself out there with networking events, getting yourself out there with just talking about a project that you just created, anything can help increase the chances that someone, a hiring manager or recruiter, will notice that. So, we could probably get into more specific strategies, and we can dive deeper into all of these topics. If you want to hear me dive into any specific topic we just talked about, let me know. But the last thing is, and this is kind of a very serious conversation that I have with people sometimes, you get a lot of coding boot camps that say you're going to get a job, 3 months later, after you graduate. 3 months comes, you don't have a job, you don't really have any serious leads, and the money from your savings is starting to dry up. And, at the end of the day, you need to put food on the table, you need shelter, and sometimes you didn't plan for that rainy day. You thought the promise from the coding bootcamp was going to deliver. Market continues to be oversaturated. Like I said, you are not alone. So, ultimately, if you don't have the funds to keep going, the only person that doesn't get a developer position is one that gives up. A lot of people give up for a variety of reasons. But if you have to, if it doesn't trigger some clause in like an ISA or job guarantee or anything like that, read the contract you signed with the Coding Bootcamp. But if you are able to, go back to a part-time job or just get a new part-time job to be able to pay the bills while you continue coding, continue applying, sometimes you have to do that. And for me, if I did that, maybe my ego when I was younger would have gotten in the way. There are a lot of reasons people don't want to go back to the part-time job. You just spend all this money for a coding boot camp and you just learn this really serious technical skill that's respected. It's an industry that you should feel proud of for growing in and becoming a better software engineer, and then having to go work at McDonald's for something like go work at McDonald's when you just invested like $15,000 in a coding boot camp. You're like, well, this wasn't really the plan. So, but sometimes you have to do that. And I'm emphasizing this because you don't want to put yourself in a tight spot. Most of the time, people make really, really terrible decisions when they have a lot of financial pressure. And so working at a part-time job, I'm saying McDonald's because I worked fast food before. I worked at Taco Bell. Not a fan. I would, work at fast food if I absolutely had to, but, just thinking about that part-time job you don't want to do, it can help alleviate stress. It can help alleviate financial pressure for you to continue moving forward, continue making growth as a software engineer, and really make the money that you just invested in a coding bootcamp count. And it can give you more months. And if it's paying the bills and you can continue growing as a software engineer, you will eventually get that position. So, that's one thing a lot of people don't like to think about. That's why I always encourage people to have like 6 months to up to a year, usually worth of savings after you graduating a coding bootcamp. But, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And I can promise you, a lot of people don't want to do that initially, but it has alleviated pressure and it was a good decision in the long run. So, that's what I have for you now. We can dig into more specifics if you want more tips, anything like that. Let me know in the comments below. But just keep pushing forward. I promise you it's going to pay off in the long run.